Hello, everybody. We're live on LinkedIn and on YouTube. Welcome, everybody, to Master Negotiators Live, which is your weekly guide to negotiation. My name is Jane Raitt. I'm an associate professor of management at McGill University, where I specialize in negotiation and conflict resolution. So, what can you expect from Master Negotiators Live? Every week, I invite two master negotiators, negotiation experts, that will give you practical feedback and practical negotiation tips that you can use in your daily life. So let's get this show started. My first guest is Keld Jensen, a negotiation negotiation strategist, CEO of the SMARTnership Negotiation Organization, and an award-winning author with 30 years of experience in international management and education. Keld, hello. You just published your new book, The Negotiation Essentials. Congratulations. How has the launch gone?
Thank you for having me, and thank you for promoting my book. It's actually gone really well. It went on to Amazon bestselling list, and it's a funny thing with releasing your book. Is like having a baby, obviously, and you're very keen on it. But the sad thing is you don't really know how it's going until about 6 months later, because bookstores have the right to return. So you only know how much was printed, and then you don't know how the sales are going. But from what I hear, it's going quite well. So I'm excited.
And I'm assuming a lot of people buy on Amazon anyway, right? So you can track that pretty well. Great. So my second guest is Mathew Schulz. He's a procurement expert with a rich background as a business advisor, tech strategist, and engaging speaker. Mathew is the incoming VP of Procurement Strategy at Airbase and the former head of global procurement at Forrester. Hey, Mathew.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for having me. What a pleasure. Keld, great to see you.
And congratulations.
Sorry. I was going to say, wondering if I can get an autographed copy of that book. If I put it in my thumbs up, I'll take it. Great.
Do you do autographed copies, Keld? Do you have like a system for that?
I do. I'm actually doing a book tour right now, so my hand is tired. I do it. Yes.
I'm sure. That's amazing. Can you tell us, Mathew, really quickly what procurement is for people who don't know?
Oh, sure. I think that's always an interesting question. Let's start off maybe with a book definition, something as simple as buying goods and services. Now, I'd like to think there's so much more involved in that. Often you'll hear me say procurement is business. I think a lot of people think of procurement in terms of buying and selling, right? Business, isn't that buying and selling? And oftentimes it plays such a big role within a company, much more than just cost savings or getting the things you need to be in business.
Right. Excellent. Thank you so much. So if you're watching us right now, I want to know where you're coming from. Where are you watching us from? So type it in the chat. I'll feature it. And if you hear some noise, I actually have a puppy on on my laps. It's my new dog, and she is very clingy. And so I can't just leave her on the ground. She's not going to let me do this. So I'll try to keep her busy and still manage my job in the chat. Okay, so let's start maybe with Keld. What drew you to the field of negotiation, and what keeps you passionate about it?
How much time have I got?
Let's say 1 minute.
All right. Well, the short version is that previously I was in the tech industry. And one day I woke up and realized that I was unconsciously incompetent in the world of negotiation. I was actually terrible at it. But I was heading up a pretty big tech company, and sometimes C-suites, executive feel that they're automatically great at negotiation because they're at that level. And I suddenly realized I wasn't. And that makes me change career and immediately move into the world I've been in since, helping and assisting organizations and government improving the world of negotiation and changing the mindset. What makes me wake up every morning and do what I'm doing? Because I know we can do so much better. Now, there's a lot of great negotiators out there, but we are still losing so much potential. And we are still making the same mistakes that we did 40 and 50, 60 years ago. The last thing I want to say is that traveling the world doing keynotes, I always say that we basically negotiate like we did back in 1776. And I'm happy to share why that year came out. But I don't really feel we have changed a lot. We basically negotiate the same way. We have added electricity to a lot of it and do virtual and online and have contract management software and what have you. But we really need to change the mindset on how we perceive negotiation. Sorry, that was probably more than a minute.
No. It makes a lot of sense. And how many books have you published? It's an
25.
insane number. Yeah.
25.
Would you be, I think it would be possible that you're the person on this planet who has published the most books on negotiation.
I actually have no idea. No idea.
I think so, because even people like Leigh Thompson, that I really like a lot at Northwestern, I think she's published just 4 or 5 books. I don't think I know anybody who's published 25 books on negotiation. So pretty amazing. And as I was saying, you have your new book, Negotiation Essentials. What pushed you to write a book on negotiation essentials, by the way?
It was actually McGraw-Hill's idea. They came to me and said, you know what, we have an essential series on communication, on management, and what have you. We want one on negotiation as well. And I hadn't done a book for a few years, and I was actually honestly thinking, I'm done. That's it. I have nothing else to say. But I love the idea because it is really essentials. I'm trying to bring the essentials back, and it's divided into 3 categories or 3 chapters, main chapters that basically focus on what is the essentials, how can we develop that, and what is the advanced level. So it was a great experience for me writing it because it was really a step back, and I think it's a book that could be relevant for a lot of people.
Excellent. Thank you so much. What about you, Mathew? Like, what drew you to negotiation, and what keeps you interested about it?
Well, note to self, maybe write a book. My gosh, Keld, that's amazing. Well, jokingly, I think given the nature of the job, procurement, you have to negotiate, right? So I don't know that I chose it, but like Keld, I realize how important it is, not only for the position, but on behalf of the business. Also, I think it's in my DNA, part of who I am, how I grew up, how I think. You're often negotiating in your day-to-day activities.
So you were doing procurement at Forrester, and now you are in a new company. How does procurement work in the service industry? So meaning it's not like a factory where you have to buy.
Indirect versus direct, right? Am I buying widgets so I can go and build something, or is it more indirect? Such like Keld, I'm buying technology or professional services. There's certainly a difference there. A lot of people often use the term supply chain and procurement synonymously, or suppliers versus vendors, often the same thing. However, it depends on what industry you're in. Like Keld, I'm in technology, and so it's much more indirect based, often buying technology that we need to then build technology and ultimately sell it.
Amazing. Before we go into the questions, I wanted to share with you something funny that I received by email. Somebody sent me that Master Negotiators Live is the #2 podcast in the category management in Slovakia.
Whoa. Congrats.
It just cracked me up. And #10 in Nigeria. And so it seems I'm not in the top 50 in management in Canada yet. I'm the top 53. And so, it just cracked me up. I just might move to Slovakia. God knows, we're big there. So we might want to do that. Okay, so let's start. And I think it's a topic that a lot of people are very interested in, which is the key mistakes that people make in negotiations. So, Keld, in your view, what's a common pitfall that negotiators fall into regardless of the industry?
Great question. I would say lack of strategy. Not having thought through how you want to negotiate before you negotiate. I often say that we have to negotiate on how to negotiate before we negotiate. I know it sounds weird, but think about it this way. You and I don't perceive negotiation the same way necessarily. You may perceive negotiation like playing chess. I may perceive it as playing tennis. And imagine, Mathew, you and I, we have to negotiate, and I'm coming into the conference room, and you're sitting with the chessboard and moving the chess pieces around, and I'm walking there with the racket, ready to play tennis. That's going to be really awkward. So one thing that I feel that the majority of everybody is missing is actually creating a company strategy. how do we want to negotiate? Do we want to be, if I should just put it into two boxes, should we be collaborative? Should we be more CSM oriented? So I would take that step back. And I think, Jay, that there are too many trainers out there that are too focused. Now, tools are important, but are too focused on just the tools in the toolbox before actually taking that step back and addressing the fact that negotiation is a leadership strategy, something that the C-suite in the organization have to establish a strategy on how to handle. So again, sorry, long answer, strategy. Big mistakes that a lot of negotiators are suffering from not having.
That's a really excellent point. So this is connected. I'm hosting on March 1st and 2nd the McGill des Hotels negotiation competition, where we have 16 teams of MBAs that are coming. And this year, I've created a new challenge that they will do in parallel to traditional negotiations, which is they have to code an AI that will negotiate for them. And one of the reasons, it's kind of like just a ChatGPT prompt, but one of the things that I really, really like about it is it forces people to think about the strategy, because you have to tell the AI, like, this is how we do things. This is how I'm expecting you to behave. And so I really do believe like it's a great learning opportunity, and people typically don't go into a negotiation with a strategy. And even worse than that, I think you were giving the example of playing tennis. And I always like to say, if people were to like play tennis with a professional, they would hold a racket beforehand and they would try to practice. But for some reason, when they're negotiating with a professional, they don't. They just show up and hope it's going to work out, right? Whereas like if you're negotiating your salary, you're literally negotiating with somebody who's a professional negotiator. Like that person negotiates 100 times a year.
Right. Absolutely.
Right. So, Mathew, focusing on procurement, what would you say is the number one mistake made in procurement negotiations?
Well, I loved strategy. And I would add, since we've already kind of alluded to it, preparation, right? I think oftentimes when you're in procurement, historically, it's been seen as a back office function. In other words, it's part of finance. It's administrative, it's very tactical. And so if you look at it through that lens or that approach, oftentimes it's cost savings. So you're prepared to show up and talk about numbers, but are you prepared to talk about people? And you're negotiating with people. And so I think that's a big mistake. And I would agree, strategy is equally as important.
So absolutely. I think it's a great answer. Something that I find very interesting about procurement, I think, each subfield of negotiation has kind of like their own challenges. And something I've talked about, I've talked with people in procurement, is sometimes you have to negotiate when you only have one provider. Like you only have one person who's providing the service, and procurement people are often, in that situation. So do you have tips on how to negotiate if you only have one provider?
Well, that's very interesting. And I think it happens a lot, right?
Yeah.
And you think of it in terms of strategy or preparation, the big L word, leverage.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't have nearly as much leverage as you thought you did because there's only one provider. I go back to people and understanding who you're doing business with and start thinking more long-term. It's likely you're going to go in business with them because they're the only option. How can you make that fruitful for both of you in the long term? Much less thinking about negotiating on a cost savings perspective in the short term.
Excellent. Thank you. So Keld, so now we're going to get into kind of like negotiation strategies. And so if somebody approached you and said, tomorrow I have this big negotiation coming up, what should I do to prepare? What would you tell them?
Well, the first thing I would tell them is that you don't have a lot of time. No. And you should probably have prepared a little bit before, the day before your negotiation. But if that's what we have to work with, I would immediately sit down and there are four things really that is important. Besides strategy, we have talked about already. The other one is the creation of trust. I'm a firm believer, and it's not emotional, it's actually fact-proof, it's researched, it's documented, that if we are able to increase trust in negotiation, our transactional cost will go down and profit will go up. So trust in some people's mind is a fluffy thing. In my world, is a monetary value. It's simply just improving the bottom line. So the second thing I'm focusing on besides strategy is trust, what I call trust currency. How can we insert trust? How can we increase trust? What should we do if trust is declining? Third one I'm focusing on is rules of the game. That is actually back to how should we negotiate this negotiation? Are we going to negotiate collaboratively? Are we going to negotiate in a series on more focused on winning at the expense of the counterpart? And the fourth and the final thing is one of the things that I explained in my new book, Negotiation Essentials, is the concept called Negoeconomics. That is an award-winning mathematical model I created that shows that up to 42% of the values on the table are being left. And it's not magic. It's the asymmetric value between your cost and my value and my cost and your value. Quick example, if we're talking in terms of payment, Matthew, instead of just sitting hackling back and forth where you want 90 days line of credit and I don't, we should start sharing our cost of currency. So what is your cost of your value and what is my cost of my money? And if we suddenly find out that your cost of money is lower than mine, obviously you shouldn't have a long line of credit. You should pay up front and get a reduction in price that would compensate you for that loss. Quick example. So anyway, there's more to it, Jane, but these are the four things I would focus on working with a client that is about to get into a negotiation tomorrow. Oh, the last thing I want to add is number of variables. So everything that is negotiable. That could be delivery time, warranty, warehousing, services, installation, pricing, what have you. I just want to share something with the audience right now. All of you, and I know that for a fact, is negotiating on too few variables. That means we negotiate on the variables we always been negotiating on. But making an effort, we can expand that number of variables and immediately improve the room for negotiation and the profit as well. So that's something I always start with immediately. Let me look at your variables and let's see how we can expand that. And typically, people show up with 7, 8, 9 commercial variables, and we easily expand that into 20, 25, 30, 35 variables. There's some examples in the book as well.
That's excellent. And I really agree with you. I advise a lot of students when they're on the job market, and what I've started to see over the past few years is, before people were only negotiating their salary, like that was it, and now, they're negotiating also their work hours, their training opportunities, like all that stuff. And so it really is a package. And I've seen a lot of students who would tell me, like, what if they can't move on the salary? And then I say, well, what else can give you value? Like, what else, what can they give you? Because a lot of times companies who can't move on salary, they're willing to accommodate you on something else. And so I really like that a lot. We have a comment. And so, Mathew, I'd love to have your opinion on this. I'm going to try to see if all of it is displayed, but it's Michel Poitras who says, uncertainty about business retention is the best weapon when dealing with a sole source provider. Keep them on their toes. Oh, and the size of the bonus the sales rep will get from the next renewal. Those are leverage points. What do you think, Mathew?
Well, it's so interesting, right? A couple things stick out to me. One, the term best weapon, right? The approach, is it a weapon? Are we arming ourselves? Or alternatively, can it be, as Keld suggested, more collaborative in nature? Right. And so we do think of it as business retention, or I might take this away from you, which means you then need to give me a big or a good deal now. Or when you talk about people, right? Of course, sales reps are incentivized by a commission. Taking that away from them, is that collaborative in nature? I don't know. But yes, historically, those have been negotiation tactics, I would suppose.
Right. That's really interesting what you're saying about, the words we use in a negotiation. I know, like, I've had students tell me in the past, I was using opponent as like a word, Yeah, and students have told me, like, this is not like an opponent, and so now I use counterpart, which is more neutral. But I've seen, like, Paul Nadeau uses negotiatee, like, I think there's just like a lot of ways to use the words, and there is not a fixed thing. But I think people are very uncomfortable with conflict, and conflictual negotiation, but they're much more comfortable if it's a discussion, collaboration, kind of like building trust, as you said, Keld. So Mathew, so procurement can have unique challenges. Can you describe a difficult procurement negotiation and how you managed it. And you can stay abstract. You don't have to give us all the details.
Gosh. Well, there's certainly so many. I would probably pick a theme. When you start negotiating on behalf of a company and you start getting into these higher thresholds, 7-figure deals, right? $1 million or more, the number of stakeholders that get involved in negotiations makes it extremely difficult. Everybody has their opinion. Everyone has a say, thoughts, what have you. Also, money talks at some point. And when a company is making, here's terminology, an investment in a tool or a piece of software or some services that cost a substantial amount of money, everybody wants to have a say.
Yeah, I'm part of a big university, and you can't organize anything without 20 people being, in CC. So I definitely
That's often the case.
Yeah, and you feel like you organize all these meetings and just everybody comes up with something that can't be done. Like basically you can't do that. Like we're not going to let you do that. And so, sometimes you're feeling like, oh, maybe I should just do it on my own then.
Right. It's interesting. To Keld's point, I caught myself shaking my head when you started talking about trust. Right? You brought these individuals on, you trust them to act on behalf of the business, but then everyone wants to get involved. So it's difficult. It's challenging.
Yeah.
I would say, Matthew, if I could add one thing, because, I'm working a lot with procurement, and often I find that procurement professionals are challenged because not only do they have to negotiate with the supplier, they also have to negotiate internally.
Yeah,
and I'm often advising them, they shouldn't just take orders from their customer, their internal customer, but ask questions as well. So if one of their customers come to procurement and say, we need to change delivery time, we need to reduce it by 3 months. You as a procurement officer shouldn't just accept that. You have to challenge that decision internally and say, why? What is the benefit to us?
Yeah.
And the funny part, Matthew, is back to capitalizing variables. When you ask that question internally, why do we want to reduce delivery time from the supplier? Sometimes you get the answer, I don't know, that would just be nice, wouldn't it? And in my world, that is just unintelligent, because if you don't know what your benefit might be, and you put a cost on the supplier that is higher than your benefit, then everybody's really losing. So that realization of you have to negotiate internally as well is really important, and put an extra challenge on procurement, as I just said. Not only do they have to negotiate with the supplier, but internally as well.
That's absolutely right. And if you don't mind, I'll add even a little more. Those internal stakeholders, they're literally your coworkers. Your customers are your colleagues, the people you work with, who could very well be your friends, or who you'll see at the water cooler or have lunch with, or go out for drinks or have a coffee. I mean, think about that. That adds even more complexity.
Oh God, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mathew, do you feel like sometimes the internal stakeholders are focused more on desirability than feasibility?
Yeah, oftentimes that is the case, right? Because you're looking at it through a particular lens, or within your own function or department. I need this so that we can execute on what we're being asked to do, our goals, our vision, our mission. And so oftentimes they see things, I don't want to say with blinders on, but it's certainly from their perspective as opposed to the company or the business's perspective, which procurement is so uniquely situated that they're working with all kinds of different stakeholders, the entire organization. So they do have a very unique view.
It's almost like mediating a conflict then. It's kind of like...
Absolutely. Yes. Jokingly, you'll probably hear in the Thrones, you play therapist at times, right? Yeah, I want to listen. Tell me more. Keld's laughing. Yeah, you get it, because that's often the case. Yes, very much so.
So first of all, thank you so much for people who are asking questions in the chat. If you have questions for the panel, please ask it. Keld, we have a question coming from someone called Nick Felver. And so Nick says, I'm going to read it all because I don't think we can see the whole thing. Keld mentioned increasing variables. How do you do this tactically? Sharing upfront in writing allows the counterparty to identify and give you the low-hanging fruit rather than focus on the handful of big issues. Do you take a stepped approach? Interested how the panel would handle. So how would you answer that, Keld?
I think it's a great question. It's a question I often get. Well, that's really back to what I said. My ambition in life is about changing the mindset of negotiation. And we have to change the mindset that, we have to hide and use variables tactically. To me, a negotiation is a group exercise where the problem is right in between us. So we are working together. I'm working with my counterpart, we should use the word counterpart, to make 2 + 2 equal more than 4. So even before the negotiation, I would have been sitting with my counterpart and developing the variables together with them. That is not naivety. I would always recommend stepping into a negotiation and share every single variable that you want to negotiate, and even prioritize them, saying this is the most important one, this is the least important one. That's not naivety, that's being open. Now, would I share my cost and value in each of them? No, I would not at that point. That would be naive. And then we would have to negotiate whether we are negotiating in what I call SMARTnership, which is partnership version 2.0, or I would negotiate in a more zero-sum orientated method. If I'm negotiating zero-sum, or the counterpart picks zero-sum, obviously we're not going to share cost and values on the variables. But if we have agreed and both parties are sincere about it, and we want to work in a very more open SMARTnership or partnership approach, then we would actually sit down and discuss, back to my example with cost of capital, then we would sit down and discuss the cost of changing delivery time, the cost of changing warehouses, the cost of changing installation. And we would share the cost and the benefit of both sides of the table in order to create and capitalize economics, negotiation economics. So it's really back to what I said earlier. It's about changing the mindset that is not you against them. It's a collaborative process where we're trying to find mutual value. The last thing I want to say as an answer is, I often recommend my clients and students to open up negotiation by saying the following: Matthew, I'm here today to help you reduce your cost, your liabilities, your risk, and improve your profit. Are you interested in me helping you doing that? Now, what happens in real life when you do that is Matthew will be looking confused for a minute, but then he will say yes. Obviously, he will say yes. And then I'll go to step 2 and say, Matthew, that's great. And at the same time, I think your purpose here today is helping me reduce my risk, my liabilities, and my cost, and at the same time help me improve my profit. So our mutual purpose here today is helping each other eliminate the negative and improve the positive. That's why we negotiate. One thing we all have to remember, there's only one reason why we are involved in commercial negotiation. That is to generate and distribute value. That's the only reason 2 companies are negotiating with each other. So why not help each other out and create more wealth for each other? I'm happy that the counterpart becomes rich based on that negotiation, as long as I haven't paid for it.
That's excellent. Thank you. We have a comment in the chat from Steve, who was a guest on the show. And I'd like for you guys to tell me what you think. So something that I've noticed when you deal with large number of people, like students or, whatever, you always have crazy people in the batch. Like there is nothing you can do. There is like a proportion of people who are crazy or toxic and all that stuff. And so you have to know how to deal with those. And so Steve is making a great point, but I'd like for you guys to tell me what your strategy is. So he says, be prepared to have a strategy for toxicity, narcissism, and manipulation. You might not always be seating in front of sane people. Have a strategy ready. And I think it's a great point, but I'd like for you guys to tell me, how do you deal with that?
Wow. Keld, mind if I go first?
Yeah,
I've got some.
Go for it.
I've got some examples because it happens all the time, especially within business. Right, we often think of this fictitious negotiation table, which is not the case. It happens in emails, text messages, phone calls, video conferences, you name it. And all kinds of unique stakeholders and players show up. When I run into a situation like that, I often call it out because I find that to be way more effective than trying to ignore it or push them off to the side. They're there for a reason. They're bringing this up. And I think when you have more stakeholders involved, you can often find allies within that will agree with what you're saying, even though it's uncomfortable to say. I find that works extremely well.
Do you have an example of a situation like this? Without names?
Well, I was going to say, I'm trying to think of one that doesn't put me in a situation where it's like, oh, it was that vendor and you were working where?
Maybe from a long time ago.
Maybe I'll plead the fifth. It happens a lot, which I know we're all laughing because it's so true.
Yeah, I mean, people also can take things very emotionally, and you have to
Yeah.
deal with it, because at the end of the day, like, that's how they are living the situation, like that's how they're experiencing it.
Yeah.
So I
I
feel
would
like
agree.
maybe sometimes, like, nobody thinks of themselves as toxic or a narcissist. Like, nobody says, "Oh, I know I'm a narcissist," right? Like, but they do behave consistently with that, and so you have to know how to deal with them. Keld, what do you have to say about it?
Well,
Uh,
first and foremost, I agree with everything Matthew is saying, and I applaud you, Matthew, because you have to be brave sometimes to call it out. But I certainly
yeah.
I would emphasize what you just said, and I completely agree with you. Well, I would say two things really to add to what Matthew said already. One of them would be decide whether you actually want to do business with that counterpart who's crazy. I mean,
Yeah.
you should sometimes be
Yes.
better than that and just walk away, saying thank you, but no thank you. Good luck with your life. I'm not going to be part of that, because if your counterpart is toxic and crazy during negotiation, what's going to happen post negotiation when you
Oh,
have to work together? So that's one choice. Now, what I sometimes find is that it's not the organization or the team that is insane; it is one individual. And that one individual can actually spoil the whole negotiation. So what we sometimes do, you have to be careful how you do it, but we actually walk to the counterpart or the counterpart's management and say, with due respect, we do find that person X in your team stands in the way of the best possible outcome, not only for you, but for us as
Yeah.
well. So very respectfully, we kindly ask to replace person X in your team with another one. Now, I can't stop right there because I'm basically asking for a war if I'm not moving on. So the next thing I would say is that, and by the way, if there's anybody in our team you would like to step down, please point to that individual, and that individual would step down. Now, the risk, JN, is obviously they would point to who? They might point to me, but then I have to step
Yeah.
down. As an individual, I can't be bigger than the projects. And I love the phrase that, all business is human. We have to remember that. It's people negotiating with people. It has never been two companies negotiating with each other. It is Matthew negotiating with JN, right? And if you guys can't figure it out, if one of you are being replaced by another individual, that negotiation might suddenly become very successful. So we have to be mature and realize that the person, could sometimes be yourself, are actually standing in the way of best possible outcome. But all of what we said right now sounds easy in theory, but is much, much harder in reality.
Yeah.
excellent.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So we're going to go into kind of like the last segment of that segment, where I'd like for you guys to give me some insights that you have. So, Keld, what's the best piece of negotiation advice you've ever received?
Shut up and ask questions. I think all of us, so do I, no better than anybody else, have a tendency to not really listen. We think we listen, but we're not really listening to what the counterpart is really saying. We're listening to prepare what we want to say. So we move into argumentation instead. So I had a mentor for many, many years that keep telling me to be quiet, just be quiet. And he kept saying to me, "You've got two ears and one mouth," and I just kept blabbering until one day I realized that what he actually meant was I should try and listen more and then ask questions. So I often say we should replace the word or the sound of the word with the sound of a cash register, because when a counterpart raises a topic, we have an interest in doing X. The reason they're saying it is because they have a financial interest in doing it. Otherwise, they wouldn't raise it. So we have to listen for the value behind the words and then ask questions. And that requires that we really listen. And that's not easy. It's not easy for human beings to really listen. Dr. Dan Shapiro from Harvard, the head of the Harvard program on negotiation, I'm a big fan. He's a great guy. He's actually traveling the world talking about we're all in tribal. We're all more tribal today than ever before.
Oh,
So if Matthew is saying something I don't agree with, Matthew is stupid. I don't even want to listen to him because he's wrong. And we lost the ability to really agree and empathize with somebody we disagree with. Because even I disagree with Matthew. He might be a great guy and he might be intelligent, and perhaps I could learn something. We can see it in American politics. We can see it everywhere. We become tribal. It's a long explanation why, but social media is one of the reasons. So we really have to get back to the ability to listen. Again, sorry, Jan, long answer, but listening and questioning.
no, that's a great answer. Matthew, what about you? What's a piece of advice that impacted you?
Yeah. Well, It's hard not to want to default to listening because it is so, so important. I'd say alternatively, being prepared. And I think when you get into negotiations and you're doing it on behalf of a business, from a procurement perspective, think of it. Your counterparts have a lot of tools and a lot of information about you to sell into your account. I don't know that procurement has that, and there's a big opportunity for us. I start looking at things like the website, pretty basic. How about LinkedIn? Who's the individual that I'll be talking to? What about the leadership team? Have they recently gone through a round of layoffs? Are they a startup? Did they just get a round of funding? What's the lay of the land and the climate of that particular company?
That's excellent. And so we're going to switch to the second part of the show, which is called Master Negotiators React. So let me put a little jingle, and then I'll show you the video I've been thinking about. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for being with us. This is Master Negotiators React, where expert negotiators react to a video or a negotiation captured on video. The professionals we have backgrounds in law enforcement, procurement, business, diplomacy, and we're here to give you practical advice and react to a negotiation. So today I'm joined by two master negotiators, Keld Jensen, master of negotiation with 3 decades of experience in international management and education. He is the CEO of SMARTnership and has written a lot of books, 25 books, you were saying, including this one, Negotiation Essentials, that just came out a couple of months ago. The second guest we have today is Mathew Schulz, a negotiation and procurement expert who's been a business advisor, tech strategist, and engaging speaker. Mathew is the incoming VP of Procurement Strategy at Airbase and the former head of Global Procurement at Forrester. Hey guys, thank you so much for making time for me. If you're joining us, please type in the chat where you're joining us from and say a little hello. Otherwise, we can't know you're here. So what I'm going to do is tell you a little bit. I've selected a video today that's around 7 minutes long. It's really interesting because it's very modern in the sense of like it's somebody who reported being reprimanded by their boss. And so, and they posted it on their own YouTube channel and it had millions of views. So it's Jonathan Hawley, who was a janitor because he got fired at Webbridge Middle School in Georgia. He recorded his interaction with the school principal, Susan Opferman. And she accuses him in the video of leaving his shift 15 minutes before it was over. And so let me share the video. I think, the goal here is you're going to see that, Susan is not doing a great job, dealing with the situation. So we're going to try to find kind of like what mistakes are made and how we can improve it. So let me share my screen.
Great.
The media player is here. Allow. There you go. And I'm going to try to do it this way. I think it works well. So let's watch it. There's like a random kid sitting in the front because he is like basically on his way to the office. Okay. So before we continue, I have a lot of things to say about this, but I want to know what you guys think about kind of like how the negotiation or the conversation is starting. Who wants to go first? Mathew, do you have something to say?
Well, I can't hear it. Can
you can't hear what's going on? Oh, okay.
No,
so
unfortunately not. Sorry about that.
No.
I thought it
So
was
let
just
me
a
try
big ramp
again.
up.
Let me try again. Maybe I can do it this way then, without So sorry. I thought you guys could hear it. So
No,
let me
don't
try
apologize.
with this. 'Cause I was, I'm testing out a new system.
Okay, great.
Okay.
So, what are your hours?
My hours is from 6:30 to 3
Can you guys hear it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
o'clock.
Yeah.
Why did you leave today at 2:45?
I didn't leave at 2:45.
You did.
I did not leave at 2:45.
We were calling you.
When I left, it was.
What time do you think you left?
When I left, when I was
What
leaving out
time do
that
you
door,
think you left?
when I was leaving out that door, it
What
was
time do you think you left?
2:52. When I was going out that door,
Because you left early.
I didn't leave early because I was here early.
What time?
Okay. So this,
Wow.
what do you think?
Yeah. Well, my initial reaction is, I immediately sense the tone and the vibe, right, as they start talking. Very combative, and such short, choppy sentences, and they're almost, I immediately get this sense of defensiveness, as one might if you feel like that approach is coming at you.
Excellent. Keld, what do you think?
Well, to me, it sounded like an interrogation. I don't know if there was anything before that, whether those two individuals had talked to each other beforehand, but that was a horrible way of starting any kind of dialogue about anything. Whether the guy is wrong or right doesn't matter. That's just the most terrible way. I'm actually impressed that you said it's happening on the school, and that is the principal. That you would imagine they had better communication skills than that, but.
Yeah, but I think it's kind of like, because you have like thousands and thousands of schools, like you're going to have some really shitty, people in some of them. So something that's interesting is Jonathan Hawley, so the janitor here. So we've seen kind of like he films himself going into the meeting, I'm assuming because he doesn't want to like turn on his phone during the meeting. But so we really see that she's getting very aggressive right away. Like he's not even sat down, and she's not saying hello. She's not asking him anything. She's just like interrogating him, really angry. And the second thing is the title of the video, and I'll link it in the description, but the title of the video is "You Shouldn't Talk to Your Employees That Way." And so that's kind of like the reason why he posted the video. So, it's interesting to me, because had she approached the situation with respect, there wouldn't be a video with millions of people watching it, right? Like, it's really about the form of the video, of the speech, right, that was upsetting to this guy, which I understand. I'd be upset, if like my dean, like,
if I could add one thing, Jay, and I would actually go back to what Mathew said previously. I would call it out instead of, if I was him, just kind of engaging in her tone, in her aggressive behavior. I might have paused the whole thing and said, could we just stop for a second and take a step back? Why are you having that tone with me? What is it I've done to make you this mad? Or perhaps even after a break, if I was him, perhaps at this point I would have said, you know what, I'm so sorry, I need to go and use the restroom. I wouldn't have engaged that conversation already at this point. In this, we probably only seen 30 seconds. At this point, I would already have left, call for a break, or actually take a talk about, discuss how we're actually going to conduct this conversation.
Because she's not even letting him speak. Like, she's saying, what time did you leave your job, or something? And then he's like answering. He's not even able to say one word. She said, when did you leave your job? You're like, dude, like, hold on. Like, he's answering. Like, you're asked a question, he's going to answer. So she's obviously very upset. And to me, like, that's already the biggest mistake, right? Like, you can't get somebody leaving their job 15 minutes early upset you this way. I mean, like, what's going to happen if one day you have a real problem? Like, how are you going to react to it?
I would typically, Jane, say, if this was a negotiation I would be involved in, there's another issue she got that may not be connected to him at all. She might have to somewhere else in the organization. She might have some pressure on her, and unfortunately, he's the first one she's meeting, and he's getting it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I also noticed this. The janitor chose and already knew that they were going to record it before they walked through the door,
Right.
which speaks volumes of their relationship and or
Yeah.
who this individual is as a, gosh, I hate to say leader, manager, supervisor, maybe at best.
Right.
You're
Definitely
gonna
not a
see-
people leader.
Yeah, I think you're going to see that he feels he's been picked on like for a
Sure.
while. And so
Yeah.
so I think, he's doing what a lot of people are doing these days, which is they're recording,
Yeah.
they're recording the interaction. And exactly. And I hate to say this because I don't want people to just behave properly because they're recorded. I think you should behave
Right.
properly with everybody. But it's pretty clear that now if you humiliate somebody, like you're at risk, that they're recording it and then everybody will side against you. Like you might be very upset, but people are not going to agree with it with you, right? Because they
Right.
don't know why you're upset.
Yeah.
So let's see what happens.
Do you work till? What are your hours?
Miss Hoffman,
What
the
time?
fire
Jonathan?
people that was here this morning
Jonathan.
was outside. They had to get in the
Jonathan,
building.
stop talking. Jonathan, what are your hours? What are your hours? I just want to hear them again. What are they?
I told you my hours already.
Tell me again.
From 6:30 to 3 o'clock.
6:30 to 3 o'clock. Okay. And you left early today.
I didn't leave early.
Did you leave before 3 o'clock?
I left before 3 o'clock.
Okay, why?
For the simple fact I had to come in here this morning because the fire people was out there outside, sitting outside in their cars, and they had to get in the building to do the fire alarm.
Okay.
So I had to come in the building at 6:15. Miss Beckett, both of us came at the same time. When I had
Who
to let
told
them
you
in.
to come at 6:15?
It's not.
Who told you to come at
It's not.
6:15?
It's not that I wanted to come in at 6:15, Miss Hoffman. I was sitting outside, and the fire people was outside waiting in the car to get inside the
Then they
building.
wait.
All right. So I think it's kind of like I've experienced this sometimes in my life where I get upset about something and then I realize I'm missing information and I was kind of like upset over nothing. But here
Yeah.
it seems like the guy basically left 15 minutes early because he had to come 15 minutes early in the morning to open for the
Yeah.
fire people. And so he's doing what a lot of people are. I mean, he's a janitor in a high school, like in a middle school. I can understand, like he has his hours and he clocked in, clocked out, and he probably thought it was fine. Like you wanted me to come 15 minutes early, I'm going to leave 15 minutes early. What do you guys think?
It's so interesting. And I wrote down the word initiative, right? I don't have all the context here,
No.
but
Yeah.
they also probably didn't need to show up 15 minutes early. Given the nature of the role, it's probably an hourly position. I'm sure there's a union behind it. And when I start thinking of that, I go, okay, well, if we would have looked at this from the perspective of they're helping out, they showed up early. Again, it's how this was approached from the very beginning.
Right.
And it tells me a lot about that individual and how they think.
Yeah.
Again, I can't get over this interrogation. Stop talking, right? It's
Yeah.
like controlling. It's like, I'm the manager, I, me, my. It's like you manage tasks, you lead people, and that's not happening here.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Keld?
Well, one of my areas is trust, and absolutely no trust in this case.
No.
He doesn't trust her. He's recording the whole thing, obviously because of lack of trust. She doesn't trust him at all. I would say this is a very toxic relationship. If this was supposed to be a long-term relationship, which an employment is, I wouldn't give that very good chances of being very successful for either party. Back to rules of the game. You actually have to step out right now and restart this meeting. Sometimes I'm actually advising, if I'm sitting in negotiation that comes to a bad start like this, I sometimes call for a break and say, let's imagine we are restarting the whole thing, turn back the clock and let's go again. But we have to do it in a different way. Because that opening right here is just deadly for everybody.
It's really interesting. It's a story I've already told, but like in the past lifetime, I used to work in a summer camp every summer, like when I was a student, and it was really well paid, and so it was great, in Maine. But it was a really big operation with 400 kids, 150 staffers, all that stuff. And my last year, I was director of the boys and director of discipline, and so that means every time a kid was misbehaving or something, you need to put him in their room for like an hour, like just for them to like calm down or something. And sometimes, you have kids, as I said, 400 kids, you have some of them that are a bit crazy, and you have to deal with them. And sometimes, they're doing it on purpose because you're the authority. And so they're just trying to get under your skin. And I remember the best advice that the owner at the time told me was, if a kid really annoys you and you feel like you're becoming emotional about it, right? Like angry, then just put them in your office and let them wait for an hour, and then come back. And what was great about it is, you're doing a lot of other stuff during that time. So you're kind of reflecting on it, it goes down. But also, the kid as well, has an hour to kind about it. And there was this added thing, which was really nice, but the kid doesn't know if I'm on the phone with their parents or something. So,
Yeah.
kind of I might be packing their stuff and sending them home, right?
Yeah,
That would
yeah,
be the thing,
yeah.
because that happens
Yeah.
sometimes. But the most important thing is, I would never start a meeting like this if I'm emotionally invested in the
Yeah. Yep.
conversation. This is 15 minutes from a janitor. Give me a break. Give me a freaking
Right.
break.
Right.
It's not
That's amazing.
it's not that bad. It's not, there are tons of people who show up on time and then just take a break for 15 minutes. You just
Yep.
need to readjust it and mostly ask questions. But yeah, it's an interrogation. If you have, by the way, you're listening to us and you have comments about the situation, type in the chat and I'll feature it. Okay, so let's continue.
We are not open until 6:30.
So they have to wait until 6:30 to get inside the building, do the fire alarms.
If they don't have a key, the building is not open until 6:30. You don't adjust your hours just because you feel like it.
I didn't do it because I felt like it this often. I was doing it to help the fire people to get inside the building.
Who told you to open the building early? Did your boss, Susan Offerman, tell you to start your hours early today?
I was supposed to start my hours early today.
I'm sorry.
Like I was telling you.
She's talking about herself in the third person, and that's just
Yeah.
it's you're thinking, dude, what are you doing? Did your boss, Susan Offerman, tell you to do that? And plus, it's really bad faith, because she's basically explained kind of a very logical argument, right? Maybe he was wrong, but unless it was clearly specified.
Right.
So let's see how she gets out of it. Do you guys have something to say about it?
No, I cringe when I hear boss. Did your boss? It's like that. Again, word choice.
Yeah.
Do we still have?
You're middle
do we
school.
still have bosses?
You're a middle school superintendent. Relax. Just chill out. It's not that big of a deal. It does sound like she's trying to humiliate him and trying to create some distance. Think about her calling him by his first name and him calling her by Miss Offerman. What do you think about it?
Again, the relationship is not there. It's very much uphill. As I said, she's trying to, as you just pointed out, Jane, she's trying to do whatever she can to put him in a bad place, I would say. So yeah, no, it's back to what we talked about earlier, actually, Jane. When you are in a position like this in a negotiation, you should carefully consider whether this is a counterpart you want to work with. If I was him, and he's probably thinking about that already, is this really a place I want to work? Is that worthwhile?
Right.
I agree, Keld. The mental health here, and you can clearly tell the individual is trying to keep a position of authority, which isn't great here, right? This idea of control instead of working together.
Yeah, so I resized the window so we could see her face.
Okay,
maybe
great.
It can give us a little bit of clues. Kind of I know this is a stereotype, but she does have a stereotypical Karen haircut.
Yeah, thank you for saying it out loud, because I've been thinking it, right? I know this is,
and it's funny because her behavior is very consistent. So, I don't know. What I think is we're going to listen a bit more, but what I'd like for you guys also to think about is, if she were your client, what feedback would you give her? Because objectively, she's not trying to do a bad job. Like, to her, it's she's doing a good job, but she's wrong objectively. So
Yeah.
let's see kind of like how she behaves, because there's still like 4 minutes of cringe, and so we're going to try to go through it.
Put it on
Had to get
2x.
inside. They were sitting out there for almost an hour.
Who is your boss? Is your boss Susan Offerman or the fire marshal? Who is your boss?
So can use my boss. I never said he was my boss. I explained my hours.
6:30 to 3.
Yes.
Okay, and we needed you at 2:45, and we're calling you on the walkie, and I called you on the phone finally because nobody could find you, and the guy said you left early.
Left. No, I did not leave early. I had just left when they said that. I had just left.
Jonathan, if you left before 3 o'clock, you left early. You left before your shift was done.
So let me explain this to you. From yesterday when we had the meeting, I didn't get out of here until 3:15.
Why?
Because you had us in the meeting.
No, I finished on time.
No, it wasn't. When I left out that door,
I finished.
That's the time I left out that door.
Yesterday.
Okay.
I did. I made it a point to finish on time yesterday because I do not want to keep you past your hours.
It was when I left out the building this often. It was past 3 o'clock.
I don't know what you were doing between when you left that room at 3 o'clock.
Oh my God. Okay.
Do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah. Do you believe him that he left at 3:15, like 15 minutes late?
Yeah.
I kind of do. Like, I do.
Yeah.
I don't see why he would be lying about this, knowing that she was the one in the meeting. Like, it would be crazy to lie about it, but she doesn't seem to be stopped by that. She seems to be comfortable saying that's not true.
It seems very...
What advice would you give her? Like, say you were observing this and you could take a break with her. Like, what advice would you give her to like salvage this horrible situation?
Well, if I'm taking anyone's advice, sorry, Keld, I know you're just going to start. It's your advice. Like, you need a reset, right? And I wonder what this individual brought into the room. What else is going on beyond this? Because I can't imagine it would be any different for any other employee in there.
Yeah. I mean, why is she so obsessed about the 15 minutes? Like,
why?
She seems to be taking it very personal, which is odd, because like it's a plus, like, the guy has arguments. We don't know the context, but the guy has arguments that do make sense. Like, I had to open for the fire department at 6:15, so I left 15 minutes early. And yesterday you left us anyway. In addition to that, you let us go at 3:15. And so, it's not like, it's kind of like give and take. It does make sense. What do you think, Keld?
Well, I would ask her what it is she's trying to accomplish. What is the goal of this conversation? Is it just to make him feel bad? Then she's very successful. If she's trying to change whatever it is she want to change that he's doing, I think she's very unsuccessful. So I would ask her, what is it you want to accomplish, and do you think that's the right way of doing it? And then I would target something else, and that is, I got 2 kids, 2 sons, 4 and 7, and when they argue, they do every day. Some would call it negotiation, some would call it fighting, whoever. That's the same level as what you're seeing right here. Argumentation back and forth. This is my car. No, it's my car, but you had it yesterday. Yeah, but then, and it goes on like that until I go crazy and kick both of them out of the room. So we are at a 4 and 7-year-old argumentation level right here. And I'm thinking, this is 2 adults, and one of them is supposed to run a school. So I'm almost shocked here, JN, about the lack of communication skills that we see in this video.
Yeah, and she's accusing him of lying, which is kind of like a deal breaker in any conversation. Like, nobody, if you start accusing, almost yelling at the other person that they're lying, like, how can you find a common ground at some point? Like, you literally said they were lying. It's crazy.
And have you guys ever thought about, when you are asking somebody else if they're lying, nobody's ever going to admit it, even if they were. It's not like JNU is saying, Keld, you are lying right now. It's like, you got me. Good job.
Yeah, you're right. I'm a
so straight through me.
I'm a big liar. Everybody knows that about me, right? Nobody says that. Nobody says that. And that's actually something we can talk about it later. But like, it's something that I find very, very interesting, which is a lot of people actually lie in negotiations. I feel like a lot of people have grown as kids using lying as like a conflict resolution method. Like they come up with a reason or a lie or something, and they continue that into adulthood. And so I've embedded into my class a simulation like 2/3 into the semester where you can only get a deal if you lie. And so if one of the party lies, and so they're like so happy about it. It's a great, it's called Bullard Houses. It's from the DRRC. It's a great simulation. And what I like about it is you ask the person who lied, they're saying, I didn't lie. You know, like what I said was technically true. And I say, well, if you have to use technically true, like you misrepresented, you know, like you definitely misrepresented the situation. Otherwise you would say what I said was true, right? Like not technically true. And then I asked the other party, let's see with the counterpart if they think you lied. And the counterpart is like, yes, like they lied. So I feel like sometimes we give ourselves a pass as humans, like, oh, technically I didn't lie, you know, but the other party definitely think you lied. So lying is a topic I really like. And actually it's going to be in the next segment. We have a question exactly about that. So we'll talk about it. Let's finish this video and see how it goes.
So when you left this building. But I did not.
By the way, like we see, I don't know if you can see, but there's like a third person who's been completely silent.
Oh my gosh.
You're like, are you going to intervene at some point? Like, you know, are you going to tell her to stop? Or are you just going to observe this disaster?
Yeah.
Without doing anything? Like, and again, the title of the video is, this is not how you talk to your employees. Like, so that's like the main problem. The problem for this guy is not being called out for leaving 15 minutes early. It's being humiliated. This could have been completely avoided for this person.
Not give you permission to leave early today. You left before your shift was over. You left before your shift was completed. Your shift finishes at 3 o'clock. And you left before 3 o'clock without permission. Do you understand that?
I understand.
Okay. I have to call HR. I just want you to know that.
Okay,
I don't know. I'm going to see what they say. Because you left
10 minutes before the time that I was in early. I mean.
No one asked you to come in early. No one asked you to come in early.
I don't understand.
You are not supposed to open this building until 6:30. Your shift starts at 6:30.
I understand that. But like I said, I had to make the adjustment because they were sitting outside in their cars trying to get in.
You did not have to make the adjustment. The only one that changes your schedule is me. The only person that gives permission for your schedule to be different from 6:30 to 3 is me. They are not your boss. I am very upset that you did not.
Who's your boss? Your boss, Susan Offerman. Damn it! You know, it's like pointing with her. She's pointing with her like little like pen. Like, what is she writing? You know.
This is cringe.
This is super cringe, and the guy is like disappearing in the background. Like, so let's finish it. We just have 2 minutes left. Let's just finish it. But basically,
your full shift today.
Okay, so if this is gonna be on me, you might as well get everybody else that leaves the same time or leave early then too. Because it's a lot more people doing that, just me. It seems like I'm being picked out.
Well, we needed you today.
Every time, Ms. Hoffman, you always picking me out the bunch.
Jonathan,
it seems like you're harassing me right now. You seem like I'm being harassed because every time I come in here,
you're not being harassed.
I'm always in the meetings with you, and you always seem to be yelling and screaming at me, always telling me this, that, and the third, and it's getting to that frustration point.
Jonathan, I am not harassing you.
Yes, you are, Miss Hoffman. Yes, you are. You are harassing me.
Okay,
you are, Miss Hoffman. Every time I come into this meeting with you, it's always something I'm doing. But what about everybody else? Everybody else is doing.
This meeting's done. Please stop yelling at me.
I'm not yelling. I'm just voicing my frustration because just like you frustrated with me, you're frustrated too.
I'm frustrated that you left before your 3 o'clock shift was over.
You see kind of like a shift in dynamics.
Totally.
Going on. Like she gives a lot, but she can't really take a lot, you know, like she doesn't accept, like, and he's making like basically a claim, you know, she's going to have to fight with HR, right? Which is like, I'm harassed by my boss. Like, what do you think what do you think would be like, so she's doubling down in like bad behavior by like saying this this meeting is finished, which is like, now that you're saying something that I don't like, this meeting is finished. If you were to give her advice on how to close this, just imagine you're getting into this situation and you can only give her advice now for like the last minute of the meeting. Like, how do you think she should behave? Keld, do you have advice for her, or do you think it's like a lost? And do you have advice for him as well? Like, that's interesting.
Yeah, well, I had a chairman once when I was a CEO, and when I came to him with a problem, he often said, "Well, you shouldn't have brought yourself in that issue from the beginning." So what he was basically saying is, you just avoid being in there in general. And I think my advice to those two people is that they shouldn't even have been there. I mean, they started completely wrong. They went into a complete disaster, and it just ended terribly. My advice to her how to end this is actually too late, because that boat has sailed. What I would say at this point, if she realized that this is not going well, is probably turn around and say, could we either schedule this talk back to the advice, and back to what you said, Jane, about leaving the student in the office for an hour? Could we reschedule this thing? Or actually try and praise him a little bit, because he actually decided to turn up early to let the fire department in. Why not praise him for that action and saying, do you know what, actually really well. We appreciate that you make decision that is good. So, not everything is bad. But I mean, that's God, the list here. So many things that are bad. It's just terrible. I'm always sitting here very, very depressed right now.
But the situation is really not as bad as she thought. Like, when you think about it, because she thought he was like cheating the system basically and like leaving early. It's not that. Like,
Right.
Basically he's like bringing in objective information that kind of like makes her being upset unwarranted. What do you think, Mathew?
Yeah, I agree. She's just unwilling to listen. There's nothing good that's going to happen from here on out. I do like that, I think we had talked about this individual saying, hey, can I just call this out, right? And in doing so, to your point, Jan, it completely flipped the script, right? Like, oh my gosh, I need to stop this now, because now I've been doling out or dishing out all of this, frankly, harassment, and now it's coming back, or I'm being told that explicitly. It really does change the dynamic. That's how powerful that is. We just saw it.
Yeah, and it's probably not the first time she's being told that, and because this is why, like, she probably was in trouble because of it before, and this is why now that somebody's like labeling her this way, she's like, oh shoot, like now it's not the black and white situation. Now I'm going to report him to HR, and he's going to say harassed him, and now he has a video. So, but she doesn't know that, right? She's not aware that he has a video. But I think, let's just watch the end, and I'll tell you how it concludes.
This meeting is finished.
But you don't understand the fact that I was here.
The 10 minutes that you left earlier are now done. The 10 minutes that you owed the school are now finished. So, I'll see you tomorrow. I'll let you know what HR says.
Okay.
At 6:30.
Okay.
6:30 to 3 tomorrow. Every day.
No problem.
She has to be passive aggressive up until the end. Like she just can't stop herself.
Twist the knife.
Like she needs to have the last word. She wants to be passive aggressive and nasty up until the end. So what happened is, I think one of the reasons he published it is because he went to HR and he says that he was not fired, but he was pressured into quitting, which I think is like something very interesting. I'd love to hear what you guys think, but a lot of people, and like, you can't pressure someone to quit. Like, it just like, you can't force someone to quit. They can just say, no, you need to fire me. But through negotiation, you have some like bad actors who make you believe, right? Like, unless you quit, we're going to have all these issues. How do you respond to like somebody saying, I want you to quit?
I would probably ask
Mind if I jump?
as the first thing, What's the background? What is it that motivates you to ask that question? I'll probably try and dig in and figure out what's the reason behind it.
Yeah. What about you, Matthew?
Look, this happens all the time. Now, I don't know if we talk about it enough. I'm glad that we are, because the conversation needs to be elevated. I know somebody right now who's going through this.
Yeah.
Right now, over the past 2 months, it started in the holidays. They have not officially been let go and or fired, but they feel the pressure. And it's not only them, it's a team of, I don't call it half a dozen. But that's how relevant it is. It happens all the time, and we kind of just go, "Oh, it's not me," and you look away, right? And it's like, should we be doing that, or should we talk about this, because it's a serious issue?
Yeah, it really is a big problem. And I've seen it with former students, who tell me about it, that they're pressured to quit. And it's always like harassment, intimidation, it's kind of like making you believe, well, if you don't quit, then we're going to file something against you. And then people
Right.
freak out and they end up
Yeah.
going, the quitting route. I think, definitely, like, in my opinion, this is a time to lawyer up. Like, if you can afford it, like, this is a time. If they're like forcing you to quit, no, like, they're going to fire you, and you're going to negotiate a deal. Like, don't give them what they want just because they're like stronger. But it's very hard. Okay, you guys, we are going to switch to the third segment, which is Master Negotiators Q&A. So let me just play the jingle, and then I will refresh the room and reintroduce you. All right, everybody. If you're new to the show, this segment is called Master Negotiators Q&A. And every week I feature 2 seasoned negotiators to answer real-world questions from Reddit. My name is JN. I am an associate professor of management at McGill University. And today I have 2 amazing guests. I have Keld Jensen, who is a master of negotiation with 3 decades of experience in international management and education. He's the CEO of the SMARTnership and also an award-winning author with 25 books. And he just published Negotiation Essential, who is a book you should definitely get. I'll post the link, the Amazon link, in the description. My second guest is Mathew Schulz. He's a procurement expert with a rich background as a business advisor, a tech strategist, and engaging speaker. Mathew is the incoming VP of Procurement Strategy at Airbase and the former head of Global Procurement at Forrester. Thank you so much, you guys, to be with us. If you've just joined the chat, please tell us where you're coming from, and I'll feature it. And if you have like comments or questions about what we're going to be discussing, please share with us. Okay, so I have selected 5 posts from Reddit in the negotiation subreddit. And as I was saying, like, a lot of people post, but not a lot of people comment. And a lot of times the comments are not that great. So, I think it's really nice. Let me just share my screen and we will, we will do it. Allow, very good. Let me just do it this way. Perfect. So the first post is called Denial/Lying. And so it's a topic I find very interesting. The person says, how can one resolve a conflict with someone who denies what has been said? What do you guys think? So somebody who's lying, we talked about this in the previous segment, which is very hard to call out somebody for being a liar. So how do you deal with that?
This is so hard. It's so hard, especially when you know that they actually are lying. And you try to continue to objectify it or show proof that they actually did lie. And it's as if humans by nature want to dig in and say, no, I didn't, right? You want to protect yourself. And I get it, and probably guilty of doing it myself, where you immediately get defensive or you don't want to open up to that. I have such a hard time with this one, JN. It's so hard because you want to default to the goodness or kindness of people, and it's not often the case. And you're going to run into these people. Keld, help me out here.
Keld, what do you think? Somebody.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. This is one of the toughest situations you can be in, dealing with
Oh,
somebody who you think is lying. Well, I have two comments really. The first one is perhaps give the counterpart benefit of the doubt. Perhaps they don't think that they've said it, so
yeah.
perhaps they're not behaving purposely as a liar, but they simply don't remember, or they don't think they have said it. That's one thing. The other thing I want to say is that I love to think about negotiation, as I said earlier, between human beings. So, if this was a commercial negotiation, very different if it's with your spouse or kids or whatever. But if this was a commercial negotiation, I would probably try and take a route where we make it between two people. So I may leave it at the conference table right there, but then later, face to face, have a very direct, honest talk where I would simply express my emotions, saying it actually hurtful to me when we are in this position, because I'm quite sure that we talked about this issue before, and you are saying that you did. Is it because you don't remember? Blah blah blah. I would actually try and take it as an interpersonal relationship build up talk, and basically just express my emotions, because you know what, nobody really likes to make other people sad. In general, I'm generalizing, and nobody really likes to be accused of something. So I would probably make it very, create a relationship around this topic. So make it between people, make it between human beings instead of just being a factual thing.
Yeah,
I,
I think it's very interesting. I think also, to add to that, if you suspect that somebody tends to lie, I would take copious notes throughout
yeah.
the meeting, and then if the person lies, I wouldn't accuse them of lying. I would say, "Oh, I'm really confused because you said this," and I would refer back to my notes. And you said this last time, and so then kind of like let them sit in the contradiction, and
Yeah.
just so that they know you're keeping track. Like, right, like
I
you're not
agree.
just going to let them lie their way out. Excellent, but yeah, lying. It's kind of like lying is hard because lie detection doesn't work like scientifically, right? Like you
Right.
can't have a scientifically proven way of detecting lies because you can never get into the head of the person.
Okay.
So, if I watch a lot of interrogations, and, like they use tricks to like determine that somebody lies, right? Like they don't, you can't just ask the person, are you lying, right? Like they're not going to say it. Okay.
Nonverbals.
Yeah, nonverbals.
Right.
So one of the tricks that I've seen that's really, really cool that law enforcement
Yeah.
does a lot is they have you take a polygraph and then they tell you failed it. And so,
On purpose.
yeah, like they basically say, wow, like there was like this amazing guy, like horrible situation of a guy who killed his entire family and was like lying about it. And the whole thing was to say, like, okay, you're going to take a polygraph, all that stuff. And then they say stuff like, okay, so I mean, you'd be really stupid to take a polygraph. I'm the best trained in the country, like best
Yeah.
polygraph administrator in the country. You'd be really stupid because we're going to figure it out. And so kind of like psyching themselves out.
Mm.
And then they tell him like, dude, like you really failed. Like,
Yeah.
so now say it. But it's still a strategy. It's a tactic, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
it's not a real thing. You can't know for sure that the person lied. Okay, so this one I like to use kind of like, this one is from conflict resolution. And it's interesting because it's a situation that a lot of people are into, and a lot of times they just don't know how to deal with it. So the person, I'm going to try to read it all. How do I gracefully cut off my roommate who used to be a close friend? I'm looking for advice on how to respectfully yet firmly ask my roommate to move out. We're three living in the apartment, and roommate A and I found a place together as we were close friends and had lived together before without any problems. We had an extra room and filled it with roommate B. Roommate A and I are on the lease, roommate B is not. Roommate A has been consistently very challenging to live with. They moved in their partner, which is something I hear all the time. They moved in their partner without asking for a significant period of time, without asking, informing us, don't clean up, won't buy apartment necessities, doesn't lock the door, and are very loud. We have had 6 conversations, each growing in tension about their living habits and how they need to respect us roommates with no little change in behavior. Their excuse is they forget things. This has obviously created significant tension in the last conversation. We asked them to move out, and they said they did not want to. The poor behavior has continued. Other personal issues occurred on top of the living conflict that made me and roommate B realize this is not a person we can live in close quarters with. Roommate A is trying to be my friend again, but I decided for my well being, I cannot live or be friends with them. Though our relationship is very strained, I do have an emotional connection to this person and do not want to cause any emotional harm to them. However, I need to set up boundaries and cannot live like this any further. Any advice on how to go forward from there in a mature yet firm way is much appreciated. I'm feeling pretty lost. Thanks. So, one of the reasons I wanted you guys to react to this is because nobody answered. And I feel like this is like a real problem, you know? You can tell, you can feel it's something they're struggling with. So, what would you advise this person to do?
Well, I think it's a little similar. A question I actually often get, Jane, is how do we let a supplier go? It's very similar to that. You know, it's a long-term supplier, very happy relationship, or at least one side think it's very happy. And then they want to let it go, especially if it's a supplier that needs to continue their services until a new one is coming in. You know, that's a tough one. I would compare a little bit to that.
Yeah.
Obviously, this one, people often think that, in this case with a roommate, there's emotions involved. But firing a supplier, there's a lot of emotions involved in that as well. Probably even higher stake, because that could be people's jobs or, income or whatever. How would I deal with this one? Well, it's a tough one, since you have a counterpart who already said, I don't want to move out. I normally say, Jan, you can't negotiate with somebody who doesn't want to negotiate. So there's no negotiation if the counterpart don't want to do any negotiation right here. If they decline everything, if they don't acknowledge the issues, and if they don't want to move out, you got a problem. Now I know that Matthew and I and you are supposed to solve a problem like that, but back to my chairman, you brought yourself in this case. You have to figure a way out, and the way out could be that you move out, because you obviously have a counterpart who don't move out and is on the lease at the same time. So as you said earlier, and I hate to advise that, but this is a case where if you can't sit down and talk about it, obviously you can't, then you have to go the legal way, and then obviously you jeopardize your relationship, as that individual don't want to do either. But sometimes you can't win them all. So either you get the person out and lose that relationship, or you keep the relationship and let them stay in the room. You make the choice.
Absolutely. Matthew, what would you advise this person?
I think that's so well said, Keld. That's exactly it. It's hard not to look at it through a procurement lens, because I've had to do that. Suppliers or vendors, end a relationship, and it can be tough. Does it get easier? Maybe, because you're perhaps more comfortable doing it. But there is a key word, emotion, attached to that. And often that's the case. Here, they're in the same living quarters. So think about that, right? And there's clearly, at some point, there was a friendship. I don't know if it still exists. It sounds like a little bit of manipulation as they're trying to get back into the good graces. At some point, you're right. There's a decision that needs to be made. Hopefully it doesn't go to the legal path, but gosh, sometimes that is reality, which makes it more difficult.
Yeah, I think there's already the situation is not great for a few reasons. Like, the person uses a lot of words like gracefully, respectfully, like that kind of stuff. So typically that screams like I have issues, being assertive, and I'm trying to find ways to navigate this. But at the end of the day, this is what it is. The biggest problem here is person A is on the lease, and I think if that person was a family member, I'd tell them first of all, make sure, a lot of times when you have three people living together, it's very easy to have two against one, and I wouldn't want person B to be fueling this this kind of conflict, because it's really not healthy. Antagonizing person A is not healthy here. But the second thing is, I just say break the lease. If you can break the lease and move out. At the end of the day, living with somebody you hate or you dislike, and next time you get into with a roommate, have some rules, because the person probably agrees that they brought like their spouse or like their girlfriend or boyfriend, like we don't know the
Yeah.
genders, but unless it was specifically forbidden before, like there is like lots of things that people can do, genuinely and think it's fine, with everybody. But then suddenly it becomes like this situation and we need to like kick you out. If roommate A is on the lease, like you're not going to kick them out. Like it's not going to work out. You're going to have to move out, and once the lease is over. And I would also tell them, like, if they're trying to get into your good graces, like just play with that. Like you don't have to like have an open war with your roommate. Like, you can dislike them, but still make an effort to be cordial and normal. But yeah, pretty shitty situation. Not great. So now the next one is actually also another one that people have a lot of issues with, and I think here again, no answers. So how to work with someone who you fought with. I may have to work with a colleague I don't want to work with, given that I pretty much hated working with them before. And we've also fallen out as friends. First of all, don't be friends with your colleagues. Like, why are you doing that? Like that's the main problem. I also don't have the chance to opt out because both of us are needed. Hence, I seek advice as to how to work with said person without causing any conflict with them. For context, the reason why I do not speak to the person is because they have supported racist, xenophobic, and misogynist comments directed towards me only because the people who said them are more influential, popular in terms of having connections. Okay, what do you guys think? Like, basically, they have to work with basically Hitler. Like, it's like according to them.
You can
Well,
see what you could go ahead.
Yeah. So sorry. No. I'm listening.
I was just going to say, you could like these are tough. These are really tough, Jay.
Yeah.
Where are you finding these, right? But it really is a reality, and it's so tough. You had just said something about don't be friends with your colleagues. It's hard not to do, especially when in the corporate world, we often talk about companies or businesses as like family, right?
Yeah.
We've got that infused into it, which in many cases is great because it can help culture. In other cases, depending on maybe industry or sector or size, it's not. So yeah, these are really tough.
Yeah, I mean, my advice for that situation would be, I went through a divorce a few years ago. And so it's kind of like hard because you're living for 6 months with somebody who hates you. And so it's
Sure.
really difficult. But I think, because I'm trained in negotiation and conflict management, I really took it as a purely intellectual thing. Like I really removed all of my emotions from it. Like it doesn't matter that the person harmed you. Or wronged you, because at the end of the day, like you have to get out of this at some point. And so my opinion would be like the whole second paragraph is irrelevant. Like it doesn't matter that the person made racist, xenophobic. If it's true, then document it and give it to HR. But it seems like the kind of stuff where it kind of like escalated. Like I'm sure the other person has also another opinion about that kind of stuff. And if it was that clear cut, they wouldn't be working there. So my opinion would be just pretend that you're okay working with it and act like it, because apparently you don't have a choice. So, just make it cordial. What do you think, Keld? What would you advise this person?
Well, both the video and these examples that you brought up, I'm just sitting here thinking my choice in many of them would be walking away.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mess with it. I would quit my job. I would move out of that apartment, and I would give up the other job as well. I just wouldn't even deal with it. Life is too short, guys.
I agree.
I would just thank you, but no thank you. I'm out.
It's interesting. And Jan, sorry, to your point, right? You go, gosh, I've got a little bit of experience in this. Not a lot of people do. And it doesn't come as natural or as easy, or do they care to learn? So it's even more difficult. It gets exacerbated by not having the skill set on how to negotiate, or to your point, Keld, feeling comfortable just to like make a decision to walk away. Sometimes that's hard to do.
Yeah,
Oh,
or maybe talk to your manager. Like, talk to your manager about kind of like the fact that it's a loaded situation. But the problem,
Yes.
if you do that, is a lot of times they're going to see you as the problem maker. Like they're
Right.
because you're the one bringing up the problem. So they're going to see you as being difficult to work with, especially if they also interview the other person and the other person says, "Oh no, this is just a working relationship. I'm fine working with them."
Yeah.
Then you look crazy. You look
Yeah.
like a troublemaker. Yeah, but I agree with you, Keld, that, like, what's the unemployment rate in the US? Like 3%? Like,
yeah.
it's not going to go lower.
No.
It's basically kind of like you can't go lower than that. So a lot of people are looking for workers.
Yep.
Unless it's like a public servant kind of thing where you don't have a choice, but you can still change departments. Like,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
working with somebody you hate is so bad for your mental health.
Toxic.
It's so bad that it's not worth it. Like, it's really
Nope.
not worth it. But if you have to, kind of like my situation in a divorce where nobody can move out because like lawyers tell you not to, which is super toxic, by the way, terrible advice. Like, I don't know,
Yeah.
they tell you nobody can move out. You're like, what?
Wrong lawyer.
This
Yeah.
is
No.
shitty. And so basically nobody can move out. Well, then take all the emotions out. And
Yeah.
I remember thinking, like, when my ex was being like passive aggressive, or which happens in a lot of divorces, but I would take what they said and I would picture myself putting it almost like in a bucket of bleach and taking it out and just focusing on like the core of what the message was. And then I just
Sure.
respond to the core. I don't respond to like the passive aggressiveness. But harder done than said, right? Like, it's easier said than
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
Okay,
Right.
so another one, potential. So I think we're going to actually skip this one because I don't remember what our RSU is. Do you know what RSU is?
No.
I hate when.
Is it restricted stock
Yes.
units?
Okay. Because
Okay.
first of all, I hate when people use acronyms without explaining what they are.
Yeah.
Like, we're not in your head. Like, we can't know. But basically, this is an interesting one. Not so much for like the specificity of RSU, but you're going to see why. So, potential new employer asking for RSU agreement. Hello, I have received a verbal offer from a new company. I told them how much RSUs I have that aren't vested. I don't understand what that is. It doesn't matter. They also wanted to see what type of non-solicitation clauses I had in my agreement. My agreements do not allow me to solicit employees from my current firm from my current firm for 12 months, which is a non-compete, right? I mean, it's normal. I send them screenshots of the portion of my RSU agreements that discuss this part. They are now telling me that their legal team wants to see the whole agreement. I do not want to share that with them since it has specific amounts of shares I received, which I think is private. Any advice? So this is what I'm interested here in the question is, it's a company. So there's 5 comments. So what I'm interested here is, a lot of times companies pretend that it's a completely normal to share very, very private information. And 90% of people do because they just don't know what to say. And so they just end up sharing it. But this person is feeling that it's wrong. And so they just don't want to share it. How do you deal when a company is like trying to pressure you? A lot of times they say, oh, what other offers did you receive? How much are you currently paid? Right? Like, that's the type of questions that they ask you. And when the way they ask it, it seems like you should answer. Whereas in reality, like, it's wrong and you shouldn't. So how would you deal with that?
My answer in all these cases is always that, you would probably appreciate that I was not sharing confidential information between you and I wouldn't. So I'm not going to release any confidential information with my previous employer with you. So I have to acknowledge that. You have to acknowledge that. And again, I honestly, perhaps I see the world too black and white, but again, the answer in this case is no, I'm not doing it. That's it, end of story. So there's not a lot of debate here because both from a legal point of view, perhaps you're not allowed to do it. And secondly, I think ethically and morally is absolutely wrong. So the answer is just no. I don't even know why this individual put up the question. It's so simple. Just no, I'm not sharing with it. That's it. This is not even something that is negotiable. If that person admits that it would be illegal to share that, is confidential, and as you pointed out, Jane, it's a private matter. And from a negotiation point of view, I would never recommend a client to share their previous salary level or contract or anything else, that put them in a very bad space. That's the anchor effect. So no, the answer is no. Simple, no.
What do you think? Excellent, Keld. Thank you. What do you think, Matthew?
Yeah, I would agree. Oftentimes those questions, it's a way for the business or the company to gain some of that leverage if they know. Right? I think we know that oftentimes though, Jane, to your point, it's said so well, it's articulated well, or it comes across as like nonchalant, and you're excited, you're interested, like you're getting an offer, like, oh, and I want to join this company. And so oftentimes if you're not aware of it, you're willing to divulge. What I like here is that they've got like a gut feeling,
Yeah.
which is right. And that speaks volumes. Also, the fact that 5 other people commented on this finally, right? Not this like blank post that we've been running to.
Yeah.
Which is important. I'm glad that other people have decided to say something, because that's also part of it.
See,
The education around this stuff, right? Having a conversation about it. It's not normal to do that despite it feeling like that.
yeah, but some of the advice is not great. But I have to say that in my opinion, but you can see the person is struggling with it because the company is making it seem like they're being unreasonable, like, making it seem like,
Yeah.
what's the problem? But I can tell you for a fact that the HR officer who sent this, like, they've been discussing internally, well, let's just see if they're going to answer. Like, let's just send them an email and we're going to see if they're going to give it to us. But
Right.
they're totally willing to hear a no, because they know that a portion of the people will say no. It's kind of like an insurance company. They deny 100 people, like, for a claim, and then they know that 80% of people are going to be okay with this, and then they just deal with the 20% that remain. But they're not shocked that 20% of people
No.
are fighting back. It's
No.
part of the game. Like, it's part of their game. I just think it's poor form, it's poor strategy from an employer to do that, because you're really starting on the wrong foot.
Agreed.
It's
Agreed.
not a way to build a relationship. I don't like when people are deceptive. I really don't like that. Like, so the person here, for example, like the HR officer probably would say, oh, I didn't misrepresent anything. But you're like, yes, you did. Like, you created an impression that's not true, that it's expected for that person to divulge private information. And so I don't like when companies do that. My advice, in addition to everything you guys have said, is maybe wonder if it's the place you want to work in, because, like, they're not behaving great with you right now. So the last one, and I think, it's someone that I really like. It's somebody that's not someone, it's a question I really like. I don't know that person. But it says, practice negotiating. I'm a real learn by doing type of person. Most people are. There's Toastmasters for speech giving, and improv acting class for learning to be more spontaneous. Where can we get to practice negotiating with some oversight? Thanks. So the answers are useless, because, like, basically nobody has an answer. And so it's like, how can you, like, I can tell you, like, take a business school class. Like, that's what I know. You can attend. I have sometimes practitioners who register to my class at McGill, and they just attend with everybody else. I made very good friends, actually, like that. People who just audit the class, because they have issues with assertiveness and things like that. And so I let people in my class to audit. My only rule is you have to behave exactly like a student. Like, I'm not going to have like a second auditing schema for you. Like, you need to, like, if there's instructions, you need to read them. If you say you show up, you need to show up. But at the end of the day, like, I'm sure a lot of people are like me, and we're not going to say, no, you can't learn negotiation, right? Like, you can join. But what do you guys think? If people need to practice, how can they do that?
Well, I actually think it's easier to practice negotiation than, for instance, Toastmasters or speech giving or improv acting class, because negotiation is everywhere. I claim we have at least 8,000 negotiation, all of us, every year. If you have kids, start counting. If you're married, start counting. If you're employed in an office, start counting. A lot of interactions between human beings are negotiations. So just not paying attention to when somebody else is asking you for something, that's a kind of a negotiation you can start practicing. So this is actually the easiest answer to all of them. Just be aware when you are negotiating, and then take a look at it and learn from it every time. That's if you start breaking your day down into negotiation, you realize that you have so many of them every single day. So just pay attention to it and evaluate. That's my advice.
Excellent. Matthew, what do you think?
Well, Keld, so humble of you. I was going to say, I think there's a book out there that you could read or two, right?
Yeah, but I think it's really about. I think books are really so interesting, but they're just like a part of it, right? Because
of course,
you have to practice it.
And so the practice for me, Keld, you were in my head. It's seeking those opportunities or being aware that they even exist. And sometimes we don't. I think I default to, I do this for a job or a living, but also then in my daily life, I look for opportunities for negotiation. Whether or not that makes my partner cringe, I don't know, right? Or like she's like, I'm not going to be here when you do this. Things like, it's kind of cool to like try to negotiate an upgrade in a hotel or something, right?
Yeah.
Or a better seat on an airplane. And people don't often think of that. Or if you're buying something, like maybe try to negotiate a little bit of a discount if you can. Sometimes we overlook that, but really that's all part of it. That's really those daily interactions. I mean, what did you say, Keld? 8,000 a year?
Yes,
Is that what you
yes. I mean, and I know it sounds like a lot, but just break it down by 365 days and then start thinking about it. And you realize that, there's a lot everywhere, constantly.
Yeah.
Every time you coordinate with somebody, it's a form of negotiation. It's just that most people avoid all form of negotiation. So then they end up, having to negotiate the big stuff, and they're completely unprepared.
Exactly.
I have to say, in my class, in the class that I taught in 2017, I started doing something that I called a Master Negotiator contest, which is a class-wide contest where people are negotiating for real money. And so what they do is they go on Craigslist and Kijiji and they buy something, they negotiate it, and then they sell it and negotiate it again. And one of the good things about it, they've negotiated for hundreds of thousands of dollars over the years. Like, everything is kind of like tracked and it's a competition and all that stuff. If you go on my website, you can actually, I have like the rules and kind of like the past data and all that stuff. So you can apply it to yourself. But that's what I would tell somebody. I would say, like, go into your attic and like find 20 things to sell. And then just do it, like, just sell it. And by the way, like, I agree with you guys. Like, it doesn't have to be always about money. I know, like, so I have a lot of animals and all of my, Keld has, let me just get Keld back again. I have a lot of animals, and I don't buy anything new. So I kind of like buy everything used. I've always have done that. I don't know why, but I typically don't really negotiate the price because the price is so low already. Like, it's people like getting out of the hobby. And so, it's like, I'm not going to negotiate $18 instead of $20. Like, it makes no sense. But I do negotiate delivery because I don't have a car. And so I say, like, if you deliver it, I'll pay full price. And it works great because it's kind of like a win-win thing, right? Like, if they have a car, they can just stop on the way to work. But yeah, I agree with you guys. There's negotiation everywhere. Okay. So we're at the end of this segment and the end of the show. Let me turn this off and let me put us back. You guys, I really want to thank you for making time. I'm so sorry we're late in the end of the show, but it was for a good reason. I'm sure a lot of people have like really good things. We have some thank yous in the chat. Thank you so much. So that's it for me today. Thank you so much, Matthew. Thank you so much, Keld, for making time for us. Please go follow Matthew and Keld. You can the link's already in the description. So go follow them on LinkedIn. Buy Keld's book, Negotiation Essentials. And please, follow them on LinkedIn. Also, don't forget to sign up for my newsletter. This is how I tell my subscribers, like, who's going to be the next guest. You can send questions and all that stuff. And you guys, well, I wish you a great week. And everybody else, the attendants, I'll see you next week. Have a good one.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good one. Let me just put up, I have like a little jingle. Let me just put it up. I think it's here.